What if the fear holding you back isn't weakness, but a story written into you long ago? Today's conversation is about performance anxiety, shame, courage, and the power of imagination to heal what we don't always know is broken. Artist and author Julie Lavender Le Doux joins me to explore how fear spreads, how courage is learned, and why stories, especially for kids, may be one of our strongest tools for healing and bridging divides. Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate The Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The Derate The Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful Derate the Hate episode. So let's get to it. My guest today is Julie Lavender Le Doux, an artist, speaker, mentor, and author of the Amazings book series. Her journey doesn't begin with confidence, but with paralyzing performance anxiety rooted in childhood experiences that wired fear, shame, and avoidance deep into her life. In this conversation, Julie and I unpack how fear rarely stays contained, how it spreads into relationships, boundaries, creativity, and our willingness to even be seen. We talk about courage as a learned skill, why avoidance feels safe but ultimately feeds anxiety, and how real growth often lives just beyond our comfort zone. We also explore Julie's amazing series, imaginative, metaphor-driven stories that help kids and families process trauma, conformity, propaganda, and fear through wonder rather than ideology. This is an honest, thoughtful, and deeply human conversation that you don't want to miss. Let's get into it with my friend Julie Lavender Le Doux. Here we go. Julie Lavender Le Doux, welcome to the Derate the Hate podcast. It is good to see you again.
It's good to see you. I'm so glad we met and we could do this.
Yes, me too. I met you in Florida a while back at a Moms for Liberty summit, and that was very exciting, and we can talk a little bit about that. I was there, of course, talking about Braver Angels and what we do at Braver Angels. You were at a table very close to mine, talking about your series of books, the Amazing series, and which I thought was quite fascinating, just amazing books, pun intended, right? But so I thought we would get together and talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about your backstory, Julie. And so, yeah, welcome to the Derate the Hate podcast.
Awesome. I'm happy to be here.
Let's start our conversation, Julie, with just introducing the DTH listeners to a little bit more about you and your backstory, because one of the things that I often do on this podcast is have conversations with people who have kind of gone from, adversity to awesomeness. And one of the things that I saw when kind of looking into your story was that you had gone from somebody who dealt with some very serious issues Uh, and one of those is just the ability to get up in front of people and kind of talk to people. But now you've become a musician, a speaker, an author of these great books. So let's start a little bit with your backstory, Julie, and then we'll work our way into what you're doing now with the amazing series of books and things like that. So give me a little
Great.
bit of your backstory.
I just tell people I'm little Julie Lavender from Bakersfield, California. And I married a man named Le Doux. So I'm Julie Lavender Le Doux. Sounds very fancy, but really, I'm just a girl who had a big, 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 huge dream as a child. And I dreamed of performing and playing at the piano. And from like 4 or 5 years old, I was singing and performing for thousands of audiences. I mean, literally, I could see it, thousands of people. But what is not unsurprising about having a destiny or a dream is that it very often gets crushed early on. So I had some experiences performing as a very young child that absolutely terrified me and made the experience of performing feel like death,
Oh,
shame and death. And it doesn't necessarily take a truly life-threatening or abusive situation to wire that into your brain. It has to do with what you believe about what happened to you and why. And so I lived with the Grim Reaper hanging over my head for most of my life, anytime I wanted to actually perform for anyone, because
wow.
the impression I literally felt, and I didn't understand this till many years later. Everybody just said, oh, it's just nervousness or whatever. But I had paralyzing stage fright in the area where I wanted to do more than anything else was write and perform. I had all the gifts, all the talents. I was given extraordinary composition and musical and expressive gifts.
Wow.
And I actually went on to get a degree in classical guitar performance as a terrified person and have 5 jazz albums out, and I've written a ton of stuff, and it's really it's weighty material. It's got there's something to it. It's not just um a bunch of nice cover tunes. I mean, there's
Right,
something
right.
really there. But the irony of that is like being a beekeeper who's deathly allergic to bees. You just want to be with your bees, but every time you go out there, they could kill you. That's kind of how it felt. And so, but I was living with this as subtext. All I knew is I was paralyzed and terrified, but fear doesn't wall itself off to just one area of your life. It's like the encroachment of communism. It will go from one area to the next until you become more and more dominated, because the more you avoid what terrifies you, you wire your brain for more acquiescence to how fear works. So I'd gotten to the point as an adult where I was avoiding everything that really was essential to me fully becoming a woman, a wife, a mom, and an artist. And
Yeah,
I was doing a lot of make work and administrative work in my life in general because I'm good at it. I'm good at making things happen. And then one day the Lord said to me, it's your time. And I knew what he meant. He knew that I had to go deal with this paralyzing fear, primarily stage fright, but that was a metaphor essentially for me stepping fully onto the stage of my life, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And so he used me dealing with stage fright to really get me ready to be the hero in my own story that he was writing for me. Come on out, come from behind the wings and take the stage.
That's great.
And by the time it happened, fear was the word written over my life. Fear, fear, fear.
Sure.
I could everything, and it has a mind of its own. It's a personal force. It wants to destroy each of us. And
Hmm.
so my story begins really as a woman in her 40s getting over stage fright.
That's a wild path. And there's a point there in what you were saying there, Julie, that I really want to get into a little bit deeper and unpack, because I think that just as the stage fright was a metaphor for many things in your life, one of the things that you said there was something that was pretty important that I want to key on and I want to unpack a little bit more, because you said that fear turned into something bigger. It started as something that you thought was fairly confined, but then it began to spread to different areas of your life and
Mhm.
and inhibit your ability to to do things because it kept on growing in your imagination and how that started to interfere with other parts of your life. So let's unpack that a little bit more, because I think this is not just confined to the act of doing something. We see it playing out in a lot in the space in which I work, and that's the depolarization space, the bridge building space. Because when we fear other people, and that fear is often stemmed in ignorance and misconceptions,
Mhm.
misperceptions of the other people,
Mhm.
we start to allow our imaginations to turn those people into something that they are quite often those people are not. They may have one bad attribute that we don't like, but the rest of who they are becomes lost in what we imagine they are. So unpack for me what you're talking about, in the sense that this thing began to manifest itself in other parts of your life, not just the performance side, not just the stage fright part of it, but began to manifest itself in so many other parts of who you were and your personal being.
I think, well, actually, it dug in from very little in those early experiences and other things in my family of origin that taught me to fear being seen and known as I was. And that created really bad boundaries in relationships, because you're always looking for the end of yourself. Is it safe to come out? Is it not? And a lot of messiness in relationships. It made it very difficult for me to understand true love with a healthy husband who was incredibly healthy. Terrified me, he was so healthy. And learning, so intimacy is affected. And I love what you are doing with Braver Angels, because I think today one of the most courageous things anyone can do, probably top of the list, is to actually have a conversation with someone. Even to say, put the phone down and call you up and say, what did you mean when you texted that? It might be not even be a big deal, but I just want to make sure I understand. Can I hear your voice? Can I
Mm-hmm.
see your face? Can we have coffee? That is that is the stage fright of today's generation. And your work, I think, is one of the most important things, because when you are afraid, you don't know where to set your boundaries up. So you'll create avoidant boundaries. This is where you'll make rules for yourself. I won't be okay if somebody screams at me. So therefore, I hide. I won't be okay if they don't like me. I won't be okay if they disagree with me. I could get hurt if I say what I really think. I could get attacked, which of course is actually a reality online,
Oh yeah.
or if I see the words online, it could hurt me. I mean, it could really, it's not just somebody out, it's not just a set of words. It gets in. And so one of the things that fear will just do is destroy your healthy boundaries
Yeah.
and destroy your sense of, because if you avoid conflict, and like the conflict of having to prepare for a show and play in front of people without blanking out and feeling completely ashamed, or, if you avoid, anxious behaviors create avoidance, and avoidance will when you avoid a conflict or a conversation, you will get an instant hit of a chemical that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I didn't have to talk to that person after all. I'm
Right.
so glad I just blocked that guy, because I'll never hear from him again. I'm so glad I don't have to try that performance. So you get an endorphin, makes you feel great for a minute, but what it does, cycles back and creates greater anxiety. So that the anxiety builds, and then the next time you have to face it, it's even scarier.
Yeah.
So I love the idea. One time we had a horrendous conflict in my family, which I mentioned. Now, when I speak places about trauma invading even our homeschool family, when we had to deal with it, I sought out a group called peacemakers, and was trying to set up a Christian mediation with this other group, with this other family whose child had actually harmed our child very dramatically. And I was terrified. Who wanted to I mean, it was so hyped. I mean, when we had to confront the situation of what their child had done, which we had all the evidence for, they freaked out and accused us, and it was so ugly. Closest friends type thing, right? And so, but left so many things unresolved, and I felt like this Christian duty to work through the forgiveness process. Did we hurt you somewhere along the way that you would say these things about us? Would your son like to apologize and take response? You know what I mean? All these things.
Sure.
And so there was a ministry at the time called Peacemakers, and they offered people the opportunity for them to be in the middle as the, arbiter, the mediators, so that you could find a safe thing. Unfortunately, the other family declined the opportunity, but I knew I had to press into that. And I'm glad I did, for the sake of my own soul, to say, I'd be just as scared to talk to you as you are to me, but I just gotta face the fear. I gotta take the risk.
Yeah.
And that for me has always paid off with a healthier soul and the ability to fully become what I think God has created me to become.
Yeah. And that's a hugely important point, Julie, because a lot of times people don't, they think of forgiveness as being this thing that, well, if I forgive this person, it just kind of lets them off the hook or whatever. And that's really, it misses the point of forgiveness. Forgiveness is for, it's something we've talked about on this podcast with several incredible people, Dr. Fred Luskin being one of them, who runs a forgiveness project at Stanford University. But forgiveness is for us and our soul and how we work through different things and different traumas. And I mean, even if that other person, and that other person doesn't even have to be present, but we see a lot of ugly in this world. There's a lot of bad things that happen in this world. There's a lot of, I mean, one of the age-old questions in Christianity, right, is why do bad things happen to good people? And we have to work through that. And when we think about forgiving those who have done us wrong, and it's not about letting them off the hook or saying what they did is okay, but it's about relieving our soul of that traumatic thing so we can move forward in a stronger and better way with a cleaner soul on our side. I want to step back real quick into something that you had talked about, avoidant boundaries. And this is where a lot of people, I think, get the whole idea of boundaries and conflict and things muddled up, is because there are definitely healthy boundaries, and then there are these avoidant boundaries that you were talking about. And when we think about conflict, I mean, there's definitely good conflict and there's bad conflict. There's polarization, and then there's toxic polarization. And when we think about all these different things, like the work I do at Braver Angels, people often mistake that for, oh, you guys are just looking for some squishy middle where everybody just comes together in some kumbaya thing. But I need to correct them and say it's not about always finding common ground or some compromise where we all lose something. This is often about coming together, keeping hold of our strongly held convictions, but talking through it with people who very much disagree with what we are saying. And I think this is hugely important, because that avoidant boundaries thing that you were talking about, Julie, the things that we miss in other people because we avoid the situation rather than holding on to our healthy boundaries and working through things together. There's something there that a lot of people miss. So talk a little bit about that for me.
Well, we typically have the one thing we just refuse. Like, I'll do everything else but that. I'll do all that, or I'll show up for these kinds of things, but never that. And if you think about what your that is, that's where the meat is. That's where the need is. That's where the pain is. And that's where your destiny is bound up in the one thing you say you'll never do, you never deal with, you're running from. And it very often comes up in the face to face. I will never confront the person who abused me. Or if I do, I will never confront in a helpful way. I will only attack so as to protect myself, or I will never seek help from anyone who will hold me accountable, because you kind of know when you have mushy boundaries, the kinds of people that are going to follow up and the kinds of people who are just going to let you get away with things. And I'm certainly not perfect at it. Just locally where I live, there's some people that would be very difficult for me to have conversations with. But I have positioned myself, prayed about it, and set my mind that if the opportunity arises, I will not shrink from speaking, in some cases, maybe a bit confrontively, to say, do you have any idea what that did? Or I forgive you. I think that was out of line, but you need to know that there was another person on the other side of that post.
Sure.
So I'd like you to see me as a human, so I don't go looking for them, but I position myself with a mindset that says, when I have unfinished business, it will get finished.
Nice.
We're not leaving it on the table. And I think that's key. And what I love is when I first began to learn about anxious attachment, anxious boundaries, and anxious, avoidant boundaries, I was a very young married woman, and had a little counseling session, and this woman wanted to always have lunch with me and stuff. And I didn't really like her. I thought she was just I didn't want to be friends with her, and she and she could feel it. So she had this kind of unhealthy thing, people get like that, where they know they just want affirmation from you when it's not healthy. And I wasn't healthy either. And so she would call, and I would just pretend I wasn't home and make a message on the machine. I'm sorry, I'm blah, 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 blah. And I was talking to this counselor about it. And he said, I wonder, Julie, why it's not okay for you just to pick up the phone and tell her you're busy. Because she was one of these people who'd get on and talk, blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
I wondered, Julie, why that? So my boundaries started as a 30-year-old woman with learning to tell someone, I can't talk to you right now. I'm busy. Or, and I know. And that to me was so scary. But you know what that I love about it is that God has wired our brains so things will get easier. That's brain wiring. That if you do something, it becomes so easy. Your brain goes, oh, well, 5 pounds, that's no problem. Let's bump up to 7s. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, wow, no problem. Like what you're sweating over today, which is the small step to confront something you've been avoiding, maybe very anxiety producing, but you do it, immediately your brain rewires for your next step forward. So when I was doing live streams for several years, every single day, especially during COVID, I had this little show called Fear-Free Living with Julie Lavender. And I said, being afraid is learned. You learn to be afraid. You learn to be free. It's not just I'm afraid. That's how it is. No, you learned that. So learning to feel safe is actually a skill. Fear-free living is a life skill that can be taught, mentored, and learned. So same with conflict. Conflict can be taught, mentored, and learned, and it can be shepherded. If it's intense, it can be shepherded by a third party and all those things. You don't have to do it alone. You got God, you got others. And I ended every show with these words: now go do something that scares you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every day I made a point. I will take a risk. I will do something that makes me nervous. I'd rather avoid. I don't want to do. And because my life, that's a life skill. It's not just that there's brave people and not brave people. You learn to be brave. And when you do what you do, you're teaching the skill of bravery to the people you're drawing together, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right, and it's why I say so often, Julie, that a lot of growth, a lot of our personal growth, a lot of our life lessons come outside of our comfort zone. We cannot be afraid to be a little scared and work through the fears that we have in life, because that's how we grow. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from the things that we do that make us uncomfortable. I say it so often. Growth comes outside of our comfort zone.
Totally.
100%. And that is one of the big things. And this is one of the things that that you and I talked a little bit about when we met in Florida, but the COVID pandemic and things that happened. You talked about this fear-free living show that you had during the pandemic. I started this podcast during the pandemic, speaking out about the government's response to the pandemic. It was a bothersome thing for me. Before the pandemic even started, I had kind of been on this personal journey to fix myself and fix a lot of things that I was seeing in society, and fear, outrage, and grievance is something that I also talk about. It's a thing that our media and our politicians use to keep us divided in many ways. I mean, it sells, right? The fear, outrage, and grievance sells soap. It's the way that they generate clicks and things like that. But the pandemic was certainly a place where that fear and outrage was taken to a new level, and a level unlike, I think, a level unlike most Americans had never seen, because now we're in the age of the internet. Everybody's on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. 24-hour news cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And fear, in my opinion, was weaponized in many ways. And so, and this is how I want to segue into talking about your books, the Amazing series, because there's obviously a metaphor there in your Amazing series, and how you've used those books to try and help youngsters overcome a lot of the fears that they see in the world today. So let's take the last little bit of our time, Julie, and talk about the Amazing series and this fantastical world that you talk about in the Amazing series, and the metaphor that there is there for that fear, and how we step outside of our comfort zone, and how we confront those ugly forces that wish to keep us divided.
Yeah. Can I hold them up?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please do.
These are the first 3 books in the Amazing series: Constance in the Battle for Wonder, Constance and her brother Chance, and the Big Bang Backlash. This one really hits home. Constance in Charleston and the Bombastic Bafflegab. That's a dictionary. This kid understands the power of words. This is a book about propaganda and control. This is a book about the abuse of science. And this is a book about systems that are set up to bring control in education, as opposed to true empowerment, and systems that are set to close in on a child to create conformity. And so I've always been fascinated by the idea of conformity and non-conformity, because I had to bust out of so much conformity, even with my own fear structure, right? To not be conformed to the image of fear, but to be conformed to the image of him and everything he's created me to be. So I had started this book series in 2019, and somebody really said, this is something, you've got to work with this. So I started with this girl. It's about one family in an entirely colorblind town that can see color because they interact with the supernatural realm called wonder. And because of wonder, they will not conform to something called the prescribed order. And these are the elders of the order.
Okay.
Behind the scenes. Now, this family is sort of a normie family. They're sort of they know they're different. They know they see color when everyone else doesn't. They like that. They don't really want to be like, this is their house as opposed to where everyone else lives.
Yep.
They really want to be like everybody else. But Constance, their oldest daughter, just says, hey, Mom, because she's used to her being with her family for school, and they take these field trips kind of into wonder to learn, because it's a real realm. But she sees all the kids going up to the grown-up factory on the hill every day, and it's so mysterious, and it's the gray, right? It's the difference between the realm of color and inquiry and revelation in this gray realm where everybody's just happy with their gray ways and their colors because everybody conforms. But she just wants to make a friend. Well, what could possibly go wrong with the one remaining color-sided family in an entirely conforming town when they send their daughter to the grown-up factory? What could possibly go wrong? Well, the elders of the order, they're thinking, oh, now we got a chance to get to that girl, and we'll get to her family. We'll consolidate our power. We'll have complete control over Greystone Heights. And now we're off to the races. With relationships, she has to deal with forgiveness. She makes a friend. There's a betrayal. There's puppet strings being pulled behind the scenes. She's having spiritual and emotional experiences that challenge her deeply. And she begins to deal with subjectivity. So much subjectivity. In book one, it's so deeply packed with what does this girl do with her first friend who betrays her? What does she do with this sense? And her parents are just trying to, what is weird? What is happening? What forces are at work? What is changing around us? You see? And then it asks the question, just because something's real, is it true? And this is at the heart of what kids are feeling. My body might be the wrong one. I feel it so deeply. I might be a victim. I feel it so deeply. You might be horrible. You might be evil because you disagree with me. We might need to erase you off the planet. That's how I feel about you, but is it true? So this book lays a foundation. And because color in my books is a metaphor for revelation, I simply could not give children black and white books. So this beautiful magazine quality paper with full color illustrations for kids 10 to 14, you don't see this, but there's a reason why we have to give kids VIP book experiences. So they're holding in their hands and they're cherishing the relationship they have with the page and the story.
That's right.
So we set the foundation in book one, Battle for Wonder. And in book two, when the elders of the order can't quite get their mitts on Constance, they decide to use the school science fair. And they say, well, science is tricky. You don't control everything unless you control you got to control the questions. So
Yeah.
And they decide to throw a science fair to teach Constance that her myth and belief in wonder is so silly and ridiculous that really we just all need the order, right?
Yeah.
Well, our brother can't stand that. He's been to wonder. He sees how it all works. And there's a big crisis and catastrophe at the science fair. And I unpack origins. This is where she's dealing with the forgiveness issue, the bitterness between her and her friend, the forces that want to keep them apart, the people who benefit from her being at odds with her friend, right? And at the end of this book, something unexpected happens that shakes the whole town just a little bit awake.
Yeah.
And other people start to see color. Well, the elders of the order cannot have that. And they say, well, we can't tell them they haven't seen color. Think, for example, of the yellow vest thing that happened right before COVID, where people worldwide are of all stripes, left, right, whatever, they're just in the streets asking for liberty and freedom and accountability for their governments. Not red vests, not blue vests, yellow vests all over the world, seeing things for the first time and calling out for accountability, just a little bit out of control, right? And then we have, of course, well, let's just loose a global something to put you all back in your boxes, right? Well, what happens when the elders of the order, people are seeing color now, which means they're not far from wonder, which means they can't control them. And so they say, you know what? Color could kill you. A plague has been loosed. A plague has been loosed, and a symptom you get if you've exposed to the plague, you see color. So we have a mandate that everyone needs to wear gray glasses at all times to protect them from seeing even a speck of color, just in case they might get the disease and die. And so this kid in her family, Charleston, is reading about words, and he says, I got to start a newspaper. That's dumb. First of all, there's nothing you could put on your face that would protect you from a microscopic biohazard. And besides which, color can't kill you. And he's just doing it using common sense. Meanwhile, this family's getting screamed at everywhere they go if they don't wear their gray glasses. So he starts a newspaper to tell the truth. Well, Wilk, what could possibly go wrong when you're the only family in a truly non-conforming family in a town that has a paper that is contradicting what every other media source is saying? What could possibly go wrong? Well, now we're away to the races. These books are history books. And by book 4, What happens when they roll out their safety drops for everybody's eyes?
Oh
And
boy.
they say,
Oh boy.
your children can't leave the house unless they have safety drops, because those glasses just aren't good enough to keep you really safe. So, but if you take your safety drops, we'll let you out again. But what would happen if some children are blinded by those drops? Is this not what we're living through?
Yeah.
And then by
Well, there's definitely.
take on even weather weaponry and the manipulation of the whole narratives about our Earth not being safe on a climate basis, and it all through metaphor. So I'm not pointing my finger at this party or that party. I'm saying, look at the story, look at the narrative, look at the concepts. And in that way, it is my hope that anyone with an open heart could read these books and begin to unpack what large-scale ideologies used to manipulate look like, because right people can do it and left people can do it. Up people can do it, down people can do it, right?
Yeah.
And this way, it is my hope that people will awaken to what we've been through, but also if they read it in a non-threatening way, like I'm not calling out specific people.
Sure.
I'm telling you how narrative warfare works, that people can maybe step back from the brink of being mad at me because of what I did or didn't do, or what I believe or don't believe, and think about and find a safe place within the story to process.
Yeah.
And it's important for kids because we cannot let this be memory hold. Somebody's telling our children what happened to us in 2020, and it better be somebody like me who helps them unpack authoritarianism, tyranny, mind control in a way that excites them, because these books are hilarious and funny and empowering. We want our kids happy to be on the earth right now and not terrified.
Well, fear is definitely been weaponized for far too long, and any way that we can open people's minds to the idea that everything isn't always as it appears, I think there's a lot to be said there. The power of storytelling is huge here on the Derate the Hate podcast, Julie. And yeah, anybody who wants to find the amazing series can obviously go to julielavender.com.
There's an easier way.
There's an easier way. Tell me the easier way, Julie.
If you go to The Quest for Wonder, because this is all about the realm of wonder, right? thequestforwonder.com. It's all there. And I've got packages. So when you buy one book, it's one thing, but if you buy the 3 prints in books, and I've got study guides, I've got audiobooks, and I have these cool packages that make these like super, like a cool gifty bonus with lots of cool things. And if you go to thequestforwonder.com, you can get them, and there's a video and there's testimonies, but you can only get them there. Nice. They're not located anywhere else.
All right. Well, thequestforwonder.com. And then to learn more about you, Julie, obviously they can go to julielavender.com. It's been a pleasure.
That links to my books, but then you have to read about me first.
Yeah, well, that's all right.
It depends. If you want to go straight to the books, you can go to The Quest for Wonder. If you want to learn about me, you can go to julielavender.com and find your way around.
All right. Well, I hope people that are listening to this check out thequestforwonder.com. If you want to know more about Julie Lavender Le Doux, julielavender.com. And it's been a pleasure, Julie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together, so please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.